And I think we're recording. Do your thing.
Welcome back to Sinary Information Nexus, your podcast of sin.
That gets better every time.
Every time.
And I think this time, I think we finally got our audio issues worked out.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see.
Pretty sure. I've got a fancy mic. It's got strings and stuff attached to it. It's great.
You've got the CEO mic.
Yeah. So, so welcome back, gentlemen, for everybody listening, tuning in. My name is Richard Martin. I am the CEO at Sinary Cybersecurity. With me, I have Joseph Hamilton.
Hello.
And Mario Ortiz, who are our SOC managers. Say hello, fellas.
Hello, fellas.
I've also got Brazos Wortham, who is our Director of Strategic Initiatives, Integrations, Partnerships.
His title gets longer and longer each time.
Most people don't even know what it is. They just say something random, and I go with it.
How many cards with how many titles do you have?
So funnily enough, I've got one from back in the day when I was an analyst. So I probably have 6 or 7 boxes of cards with different titles on them, with different departments now too, because now it says sales.
Right.
all of my business cards still say team lead.
Well, I think mine do too.
Yeah, there's been some budget cuts. You may wind up back in that role. You never know.
I didn't want you to find out this way.
Well, first things first, welcome back to Brazos. He's been on the road this week to Summer Institute at the Tennessee Education Technology Association, TETA.
Yeah.
And our colleague, John Dunwoody, our account manager, is actually at Gamus in Georgia this week. So the sales department has been on the road. So how was Tennessee?
It was nice. Funnily enough, I'll tell you kind of an interesting story. Obviously, Sinary based here in Texas, and if you know anything about Texas, it's hot.
No.
Very regularly gets up to 105, 104, especially with all this rain, super humid. Well, I decided to go for a walk to get dinner one of the days I was in Tennessee. And I walked into, it was like a Greek place. And the guy sitting behind the counter looked at me a little weird and said, "It's a little hot to go for a walk." I looked down at my watch and it said 8 degrees. And I was like, I'm from Texas. This ain't nothing.
It's breezy.
This is spring weather.
Yeah, it was really nice. A little bit of rain comparatively to what we'd been getting here in Texas.
Well, not to go off on a whole weather tangent here, but to be honest with you, July in Texas has not been terrible.
This has been raining all day.
It's been raining most of the month. I know we had bad floods down in the hill country, and our hearts go out to those folks that were affected. But just environmentally, it's weird. It's just odd to be this wet in July.
Well, not to have seen 100 degrees yet. I mean, for like the last 7 years, that's just been unheard of.
I'm just waiting on the sun to go. I haven't forgotten about y'all.
Oh, yeah. We'll just have to wait till August.
Yeah, August is going to be packed with 120 degree weather.
Yeah.
Walk outside, the sun just be leaning on you. Hey, what's up?
Well, and you remember probably what was that? Probably 7 or 8 years ago at this point, maybe even further back, where we had, it was probably longer than that. Jeez, it's 2025.
Time's weird.
I know. But do you remember that the year that we had, what was it? It was 105 consecutive days of 100 degree heat.
That was in 2011.
Jesus, was it that long ago?
Yes. and I remember it vividly because the first day of 100 degree weather was like Memorial Day weekend. It was late May. And it did not let up until like a week after Labor Day.
Yeah, it was
terrible. And
brutal.
It wasn't 105, it was 110, 112, 115. Yeah. Like when the rain finally came in September, I remember just running out in my front yard and just dancing in it. Yeah. I mean, it was awful. Electric bills, $800.
Well, you can't turn off the air conditioner.
Right. I mean, even if you have it set on 76, like even at night during that year, the low was 88.
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
so they say that's the danger point is whenever you get to where even at night it doesn't get below, I think, 96, 98 degrees. That's whenever it becomes problematic for human habitation, because at that point your body can't get rid of the excess heat.
Yeah.
Well, in fear of people thinking this is a weather podcast, I feel like we should probably
move on. Yeah. So, but anyway, welcome back to that. But we always start off with the news, and boy, have I got a doozy today.
Well, what I know, talking about your mistake, I think we're all drinking the same thing, but Mr. Hamilton has something from a few weeks ago, but at least it's a little bit different.
Yeah, the Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA. We had one left over in the fridge, and I decided today I wanted something that was stacked. So this is the big boy at 9%.
Yeah, and I know me and Richard swapped this week. I've got the Bombshell Blonde, and he's got one of the vanilla porters that we're slowly.
I do have the vanilla porter, which is good. I really like it. And as always, Mario's got the bottle of water.
Can't afford the calories. I'm telling
Somebody's got to drive, right?
you. Correct.
All right. So in the news, this happened. At least I saw it last Saturday morning. I think I sent it all to you guys, but I really want to discuss it and get y'all's take on this. DOJ investigates. Here's the headline. DOJ investigates ex-ransomware negotiator over extortion kickbacks. The lead on this story is an ex-ransomware negotiator is under criminal investigation by the Department of Justice for allegedly working with ransomware gangs to profit from extortion payment deals. The suspect is a former employee. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but it is a Chicago-based incident response and digital asset company that specializes in ransomware negotiation, facilitating cryptocurrency payments to receive a decryptor or prevent stolen data from being publicly released. The company claims to have conducted over 2,000 ransomware negotiations since 2017. It goes on to say that the person of interest, the actual negotiator, has been let go by the company. So this goes into something that we hit on during our insurance podcast. We were talking about insurance because I remember making the joke, and whether it's funny or not, but the old cartoon where the coyote and the sheepdog clock in together. Hey, Bill. Hey, Sam. And they clock in and they start beating the crap out of each other. And it kind of reminded me of that. And we postulated during that podcast is like, and we've heard it during negotiations. Like well, I know this group, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what they say. Here's what they do. Here's what they typically. So these guys know each other. And we postulated how far away is that from, hey, you
scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Yeah. And so here's the thing that I want to say right off. This person hasn't been convicted yet. It's an investigation at this point. But is this the first of many dominoes like this to fall? And I'm interested to know from y'all, how common or uncommon do we think that this is?
Well, you mentioned that in the cybersecurity insurance episode, but I also want to point out that we talked about not exactly the negotiators, but when we were discussing offensive security and how that gets into kind of a slippery slope, if you will, mm-hmm. on the offensive side being so close to knowing all of the tactics and the techniques. What stops them from turning that from what you would say is our enemies, I guess, in the cyber landscape, to turning around and using that on our allies, right? Because they know the tactics and techniques.
So this firm's done over 2,000 negotiations. Odds are they've run into the same dudes.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, how much interaction do you have to have with Medusa ransomware to be able to figure out the other guy on the guy on the other side of the Talks chat is the same dude that you've dealt with 3 times before?
Well, and there is like an interesting idea there, which I'm not saying, like what I'm about to say, I'm not supporting the fact of like using to get like a kickback off these negotiations. But there is something to be said about establishing a rapport with the group, because it may benefit you or be in your interest to know these people so that you can communicate more readily with them. You know how to negotiate with them. They're more open to working with you. But that's taking it a step further and getting a kickback like, hey, I can convince these people to pay you, but you're going to have to pay me in return. But I would not be surprised if these insurance negotiators or, forensic IR investigators, they do know those people. I can't really speak to how common it is in terms of the kickbacks. My hunch again is it's kind of a slippery slope, and if you're sitting there like wanting to get paid and it's like, hey, I'll offer you
mortgages due.
Yeah, mortgages due. You're kind of you use too many of those buy now pay later schemes.
And I think that's kind of an interesting segue into potentially another topic to talk about, which is another thing that came up recently. What was it called? I'll have to look it up later.
I'm sorry, but it doesn't say another topic in my OneNote here.
Well, it's okay. This one fits in.
Okay.
But basically, another like pen test company had their tool that they use and that they license out to others be used in several ransomware.
You mean like Cobalt Strike?
Yes, exactly. So, but this goes back to that slippery slope and that how
PDQ
close
deploy
and how close the offensive security side is with the potential attackers. The more we try to understand the attackers by replicating what they do and by potentially even doing it better in order to try to find things before they find it, we are in turn developing the very tools that they then go about using in order to enact their attacks. So in some way, part of the ransomware malware lifecycle includes pen testers.
Yeah, well, it's actually, that's really funny because there is a section of the market in like ASM tools, attack surface management tools, that when they run these scans on the perimeter of people's networks, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for open S3 buckets and all these different things, one of the high tier ASM companies, they will actually develop their own 0-day attacks that they include in their ASM tools. So it's like a value add that they provide to their clients. Now, they generally do a really, really good job at reporting those vulnerabilities, going through their due diligence and making sure that that's all sound. But it speaks to your point that that is inherently, like, for whatever reason, if that gets leaked, there is like an attacker can turn around and use that, with associating with these ransomware gangs for the cyber insurance. You are this close, and I know you can't see my hand, but you're just centimeters away from just deciding, oh well, you could have a bad day at work or something, or you need to make a payoff on something.
Well, that's been the insider threat since the dawn of time. Is that the fraud triangle is motive, opportunity, and rationale, and if you have all those three, then there's a likelihood that fraud is occurring inside an organization. I've seen it throughout my career as an auditor and how that manifests itself. So I'll answer the question. I'm not at all surprised that this is going on, I would not be surprised if this is like the tip of the iceberg, because fraud goes on all the time. Again, motive, opportunity, and rationale. As long as you've got those three of the triangle, then there's a likelihood that fraud is occurring. So it's not just happening at this one company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think so. Money is always an extremely powerful motivator, and I'm not sure what your other news topics are, but there was one that I was looking at, and I'm not sure if Joe was going to think when you said the DOJ, but there was another thing that was discussed this week regarding a U.S. military civilian operator that used to be a colonel. That I think it was an Air Force base that he worked on. Well, he's currently in a legal battle. I think he was even it was found guilty of it, where he was giving U.S. military secrets through a dating app to foreign entities. And so if people are willing to do this over a dating app for some sort of kickback that way.
What do you do? Just like swipe right or something to get the secrets?
Well, it was interesting. Yeah, I don't really want. You have to go read some of the stuff that was in the article on what was being offered. But the thing is like, to me, money is a more tangible thing than that. And so if people are willing to give up U.S. war secrets over that.
Oh, I misunderstood the entire thing.
Oh yeah, no. It was like, hey, send me nudes. Well, why don't you send me nuclear codes?
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. My brain was not even there.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is,
New
like,
generation.
you've got people like a colonel, like somebody that had been in the military for a very, very long time, understood the implications of that type of thing, and was willing to give it up because
that has got to be the worst pickup line ever.
It was the one of the lines was something like, "Oh, my secret love informant" or something. That was it was it's kind of ridiculous. So if you have somebody that's willing to get, like, they would put you like in Guantanamo Bay or something, like
holy cow.
So if people are willing to do that,
to all the men out there, sometimes it's better just to work on yourself.
Moving right along. So I did want to, this does segue into our main topic.
Well, actually, I did want to bring up, I'm sorry, I before we get into the main topic, there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, because it is, that was in the news. I know I am.
Yeah.
But
I got the buttons over here, buddy. I can just mute you.
And then I'd be gone.
Integrations and investments or
well, okay,
whatever we call it these days.
So I think, and when I talk about this, you'll be like, okay, I see why Brazos brought this up. So do y'all know about the Ingram Micro ransomware attack?
Yes. That was almost going to be a news thing for today, except it's like,
so here's
old now.
Well, so they restored yesterday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were down on July 4th weekend. So it was about a week. And so what I did, because I wanted to see the financial impact of what a week being down would be for a company as big as Ingram Micro. So the way that I did this is I went, and they're a publicly traded company. So I went and looked at their last quarter financial report. So for a quarter, their operating income was $200 million. On average, there are 13 weeks within a quarter. So dividing 200 million by 13 gives you an idea of what they bring in per week. $15 million per week. So we can look at this being down for a singular week, obviously.
And that's just off of earnings, not changes to stock value or anything else. Because
that
of
is
incident.
Purely operating
reputational exposure, all that stuff. Yeah.
And it is July.
Yeah.
So the FY for a lot of public sector, we can assume that it was probably way over $15 million for being down for a week. So the financial damage for that.
Over what? How did they get in?
Through, I believe it was an SSL VPN.
It was an SSL VPN. We don't know, but probably did not have MFA on it.
Yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a third-party vendor account too.
Would not be shocked.
It's almost like the same things keep happening over and over and over.
You
again.
think?
But yeah, I wanted to bring up the numbers on that, because I did find it interesting, because that one was very, like, you could go and try to do some rough math and figure out exactly how much that cost them.
Yeah, the 15 million I would say would be on the low end if you take into consideration a lot of other stuff.
Well, and again, it's purely like, I was only looking at operating income, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got a lot more in there that could be affected. Again, in the reputational damage, the stock damage, Did
you find out who their cybersecurity insurance company was? Because I bet you they're feeling it right now.
Yeah, I didn't look that far, but
how much? 20 million? What? No, thank you. All right. So, again, great. Just another good segue into our topic today. And this is something that Braz and I were talking about yesterday on your trip to Tennessee. You actually spoke with a pen testing company.
Yeah.
And so I thought you and I had a good conversation about, your questioning of this pen testing company, like, because they asked us, do we do pen testing? You went, well, what do you mean by pen testing? And that's a valid question. And so I wanted to talk about what pen testing means, the different types of pen testing, because we get requests for pen testing all the time, and we have to jump through all of these hoops to understand what the client may be actually asking. Because a pen test to me is different than a pen test to Mario, right? So I want to get into explaining black hat, black box, red team, that level of pen testing and what it means to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was a big, they came up to me and they were asking, we do primarily, MDR, EDR, SOC as a service type offerings, but we do pen testing from time to time. And it is a very common topic to run into people having a differing opinion on exactly what that means, especially when some people are just I feel like the insurance episode is just going to keep coming back, but when they get that questionnaire from the insurance company that says, do you do pen testing? And then so they just check the box. Well, exactly. Are they just talking about a vulnerability scan?
Well, but that's a failure on the insurance companies as well to not denote, okay, do you do pen testing? What type of pen testing do you do?
Right.
Well, and so here's what I've found from all these the different companies that we've ran into that do pen testing. At least this seems to be the common MO for them, is they take a laptop with Kali Linux on it and ship it to the client organization internally, and then they start running tests with the inbuilt Kali tools to see if they can get domain admin. That is about par for the course every single time.
Let me ask that, right? Because I want to stop right there. Is that a valid form of pen testing?
Yes and no.
No. Is it a valid form of pen testing?
I mean, yes, it is. It is to a degree a pen test. Is it the most sophisticated? No.
Well,
but will it satisfy at least a moderate understanding of your vulnerability?
So it depends on the objective, right?
Right.
So if the objective is I want to see what somebody on the inside could do with a laptop, it's a valid pen test, right?
Yeah.
Assuming you're running all your traps, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're checking ports and wireless and all of that stuff. But we would never call that a penetration test.
No.
Right? What would we call it? Security assessment.
Right.
Right? Because it's not really, you've let us in. We're not penetrating anything.
Right. It's not, in that case, that would be considered typically a gray box environment. You've been allowed in. You're basically getting past the first major stages of an attack chain, your initial access, even to some degree, reconnaissance and maybe at least external discovery. But, you're at that point, you're being granted access to the environment. So it can't be by definition a black box. You are getting some access to things given to you. But it's not a full white box environment either. You're not working in coordination with the team of, hey, we're going to take a look at this specific deployment today. You tell me everything about the configurations you've set up. We're going to audit that, and then we're going to try to see if we can find some 0 days on it, like that kind of thing. Like that's not where you're going with that either. So it's a gray box environment, which is a legitimate way of testing. And this is something we've actually encountered recently ourselves as far as a concept whenever it comes to pen testing, which is that it almost doesn't matter these days what external vulnerabilities you have. You should patch. The external vulnerabilities are still an issue. But the fact of the matter is 85% of attacks are based off of social engineering. And that's going to work. So the better question is not, can someone get into my environment? The better question is, what can someone do once in my environment? And that's really where that kind of pen testing is starting. And I got to say, that's a legitimate use case.
So I know for us and for Sinary, what we've set up this, because we will get clients and potential clients say, hey, do you guys do pen testing? Yes. but let's talk about this. What do you mean by that? And a lot of times they just kind of drop the conversation because they don't even know. They just know that their insurance company is requiring a pen test of some sort. They don't know how to define it. And so we have to define it for them. And our process is we really do not recommend that you go full on red team pen test until we've done a security assessment of you so you can close holes. Otherwise, a red team, I'm going to pop you and
That's it.
that's it, right? You're not really getting the benefit of, okay, where are the other holes?
Right.
Right.
And that's my biggest distinction. And I know that it's a personal distinction because it's not necessarily the way the entire industry looks at it. But to me, a pen test is a single avenue of attack. You're trying to get the flag and you're trying to get out with it. It's literally capture the flag, right? Is what your pen test modus operandi is. A security assessment is going into the environment and figuring out how many different open doors, open windows does the house have? How many ways can an attacker potentially get in? And can we bar that entry somehow, some way? Put authentication on it, make it less accessible to people, maybe put up a fence, like that kind of stuff. So for me, a security assessment is always going to be much more beneficial to a client than a pen test, because I can run a pen test on you 1 year and you close up that hole from that pen test that I did for you and you go, okay, well, I'm nice and secure. And I come back next year and I do a pen test using a different exploit that was present on the first pen test, but you didn't know about it until the second year that I tested.
Well, I think that is why we're seeing kind of a rise of this continuous like penetration test modeling, where you do have someone that's running that. Well, typically it's not a human. They're using AI to do this, like the AI purple team type stuff, where basically they're running continuous penetration testing off simulated environments that are mocked from your environment, and then finding vulnerabilities within that setup. And if it's purple team, the AI will build out the controls. Otherwise, you can just take the report. But I think the biggest issue is really the nebulousness of a lot of cybersecurity terms, because each, like you mentioned, Richard, each person's definition of something may be slightly different, or somebody's understanding of a particular concept or term may be different. Like, for example, you've mentioned, or I believe talked about the vulnerability scanning. Most of the time when I hear people talk, at least in terms of a client perspective, whenever they say penetration testing, they mostly mean a vulnerability scan. 9 times out of 10. Like
that's insurance, right?
Yeah, and that's the insurance part.
Well, and some of that's because of a conflation of, there's a new thing out right now of automated penetration testing that is basically a trumped up vulnerability scan with some like exploitation involved. The thing is Nessus already does that. There are certain exploits in Nessus that are tried on the endpoint in order to see whether they work, and that's all that their vulnerability scans are doing it. I mean, that's it.
I do agree with that aspect. There's a lot of semantics that are in play here. I actually think, from my perspective, I always think about the humanistic aspect. But most of the people who work, in our industry aren't as gung-ho. They aren't as invested as we are. We live cybersecurity. Who's to say that, person at X organization just does it for a check, right? They do it, pay the bills, and that's it. So I actually think about it more like, how far are they willing to go? So a good example that I kind of keep with me is, if you've ever punched in an address on your GPS, it'll sometimes give you multiple routes, right? And it'll tell you, if you take the direct route, it'll be 20 minutes. But there are alternate routes that are 40, 50, 60 minutes. How often are you taking those longer routes? Almost never, right? You're always wanting very quick, as quick as I can get it done. And I actually think that's what most people operate under. If you tell me insurance needs this and vulnerabilities scanning is a direct route that gets me there, I'm going to do that. But is it as holistic? Have you tried other routes? Is there one better than the other?
So I had a call yesterday from a local company who is into data informatics.
science.
Yeah, they have sensors that they place on like,
like
elevators and escalators and
It's OT stuff.
Yeah.
It was like basically sensors that record like movement data and a lot of other like diagnostics from elevators, escalators.
they're trying to predict failures.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they're doing. So they actually have one client that was requesting that they produce a SOC 2 audit, controls over the data. Right. I'm like, okay, well that's fair. We don't do that. We're not a CPA firm, and as far as I know, only a CPA or somebody as a member of the AI CPA can issue those types of certifications on there. But I got to talking to the guy a little bit more, and I said, well, I mean, is it in a secure environment? He said, I think so. I'm like, what do you mean you think so? He said, well, it's on site with them. I'm like, oh, so it's data that you guys are collecting and sending directly to them? He said, yes. I said, so why do they need a SOC 2 report? They control all the environmental factors and the physical access to it. He said, man, I don't know. And so, because people don't know, they read, well, if somebody's handling my data, I need a SOC 2 audit. I'm like, well, okay, if it's in a cloud, hosted environment, sure, but if it's on prem at your client location, man, that's on them to shore up the physical security safeguards. Now, I know in the SOC 2 audit, there's a lot more than that. There's the logical access controls and all that. And sure, that stuff is fair game. But it gets back to the sense of people start asking for stuff and they don't really know what they're asking for, right? They don't know. They don't understand these terms.
They probably saw something online or asked AI and it said, hey, you need to make sure any third-party vendors have a SOC 2 audit in order to make sure they're okay.
What I'm assuming happened is that this company that was requesting this had talked to somebody that said, hey, you need to get this from that company.
Yeah.
They made a request to the company. The company went, what are you talking about? Called us because we're a cybersecurity company, wanted us to do the SOC 2 certification. It was like, well, that proves right there that you didn't really do any research into it, because you would know that, and we can't do that. By rule, we can't issue a SOC 2 certification. I mean, we could issue a SOC 2 certification and it ain't going to have any weight behind it.
Right.
The Sinary SOC 2.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
SOC, SOCK, the SOC 2, right? But it does come back to terminology, and it does come back to what do people actually mean, and do they even understand what they're asking for on this? So I did a little research, which is always scared, and I said, okay, tell me the types of pen testing that are out there. Did a Google search. There is black box testing. There is white box testing. There's gray box testing. There is network pen testing. There's web application pen testing. There's cloud pen testing. There's wireless pen testing. There's social engineering pen testing. There's physical pen testing. There's mobile application pen testing. And then there's red teaming, according to Google. So when you ask for a pen test, what are you asking for?
Right.
Yep.
Right. And so I'm
asking for a pen test.
Yeah. I don't know, man. The insurance company's asking for it.
Right.
All right. Let me run a vulnerability scanner across your network, do a little light admin action on it. And okay, you've been tested. Right. Because the other part of this, like when you do say red teaming, right, there's even rules around that. The red team assessment is not just this, wild west thing. Use everything within your power to get in.
Which on that, I'm going to interrupt right there, because really, and I don't think people understand this, because some people are like, well, do everything you can in order to try to compromise my environment. It's like, okay, but if I blackmail your employees, like I'm going to get in.
Yeah.
Well, and I know there is a part of like the pen testing, and maybe it falls into the red teaming or another web application. It really could fall into any, but there is a form of pen testing where what they do is it's like threat actor simulation. So the idea is they'll choose like an APT group, and then they model the way the APT group generally moves within the environment or attacks an environment. That's quite common. Typically, you'll see this in like different sectors. Like, so for example, if you work in critical industry, there's typically threat actors that target, or APTs that will target critical industry or specifically. And then so you'll have like a subsection of pen testers that they're really good at mimicking APTs. So they go and look at like the MITRE attack framework, and they look at exactly what this APT does, and then they model their pen test directly around that, and they'll give you a score.
But even that has to be scoped in a way that unless you can rope in all the third-party applications and get their buy-in to pen test their crap, even though you've got it deployed in your environment, that IP still belongs to them, and I guarantee you they don't want anybody poking at their stuff.
Well, and then you have even beyond that, depending on what you're pen testing. So whenever it comes to like critical infrastructure, they can pen test to a degree, but if we're talking about things like a water treatment facility, you can't.
Well, you got to bring up bullshit.
You can't pen test a denial of service potential attack because you will shut down the water treatment facility and potentially harm individuals.
Yeah.
So it becomes those things to where we are constantly going to be limited by morality to a degree, and wanting not to harm individuals.
So there is, I've had this thought a long time, and okay, so we are privy to a lot of information that the general public just doesn't necessarily have or see or even care about. And that is how vulnerable the critical infrastructure actually is, right? Water treatment plants, dams, facilities,
electric grids.
Yeah, all of that. All that's tough. From, nation state APTs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this, and this is going to be very controversial, and I hope you take it with the grain of salt. I would much rather deal with a ransomware actor who is only after money than have all those ransomware actors all of a sudden become nation state actors and start hammering the critical infrastructure. When the motive is no longer money and it's just destruction.
Yeah, there's a major problem.
There is a major problem, right? In this room we've seen it. We can connect the dots on the stuff in our little bitty segment that we've looked at, right? Odds are that we're just not looking at the worst segment on the face of the planet. That it just happened to be that what we look at is terrible, and it's the worst on the face of the planet. Odds are is we're looking at a sample of the way it is.
Right. Eventually you reach some form of statistical significance.
Right.
Like this is not an exception constantly.
Yeah,
it is
trend.
Potentially a rule.
Yeah. And so so I'm very, again, once ransomware actors go away from demanding money and all they want is destruction, we could be in for a really rude awakening in this country, and probably in a lot of the Western type countries, because it can be bad. And you know what we're worried about? The TikTok. That's what our politicians are worried about, is freaking TikTok, right? It boggles the mind as far as the reasoning behind why you would go after something like that when Chinese technology and chips and all of that stuff is in so much of the critical infrastructure.
So
I will bring this back to pen testing, by the way.
I was about to say we're kind of derailing off the pen testing conversation, but you got to remember that most of what you said at the beginning of the conversation, that most people are not privy to the knowledge in which we have, nor do they really care. That's not very high.
Yeah, and I want to say we're not a special cybersecurity company in any stretch of the word. Every cybersecurity company sees what we see.
Mm.
Yeah. But so because they're not very like the public, right? And we're looking at this from a political angle. the public is not very well aware of this, nor do they really care, right? You know what they do care about? The public cares about TikTok. I mean, or any of these social media applications. So if you're a politician, removing the fact that you may not even know, right, depending on if you've been debriefed or whatever on these particular problems, but I'll say that for the most part, they probably do have an understanding. That's not what gets you votes. If you started talking about that and the problems that exist within that infrastructure, people tune out. You know what gets clicks? People targeting TikTok and all that. So that's and you were talking about the motive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your motive is your votes.
And to bring it down to even a smaller level than that, I mean, we can even look at like the majority of our clients are education. You have the IT team and then you have the administrative team, right? Oftentimes the wants and desires of the administrative team are more geared towards accessibility and not necessarily
availability.
Availability, and not necessarily geared towards the confidentiality,
right,
or even the integrity parts at times, right?
Right.
So it's the classic CIA triad difficulty of the end user is constantly looking at availability and the ease of use, and not about confidentiality in hardly any regard, honestly. If users could just log in using their username and never have to use a password and even feel moderately quote unquote secure, they would do that all the time. They have no desire for jumping through hoops in order to gain confidentiality.
The big thing, but the big thing that every politician knows, to be honest, anybody who has tried to convince anybody is exactly that, is what is popular opinion. And not only that, but thinking more on humanistic aspects like we do as managers. It may work for us, but it may not work for them. Like, we understand the intricacies. Like, we understand that this can destroy infrastructure. But how many, like, if we were to, call them civilians, I put that in air quotes here.
Normies. Can we call them normies?
How many of them are actually thinking that far ahead? This is a golden standard, whether people want to believe it or not. And this may be controversial, but it's okay until it happens to me. That has been
but me
biggest
principle.
Correct.
Yeah, but me principle.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like, I don't care that Google's down, right? Down with the the rich. But now I can't Google search my music, and now since it's affecting me, I'm upset.
So to bring this back to pen testing and get back to the end users and what that means, the next call we get or email, hey, do you guys do pen testing? Yes. Can you pen test me? Yes.
And then just run a vulnerability scan?
No. We'll send them phishing emails. We'll grab credentials and we'll log into their O365 environment. Okay, pen test over. You failed. What's that going to tell them?
Right. Nothing.
I guess and you may have been getting into this, but my logical question would be, so how do we improve that? Like this idea that we get into pen testing, like you have somebody that comes and asks us, what is our ideal pen test? What would we do to actually make that viable or valuable to
Francis, we're not
a
interested in solutions in this podcast. We're interested in complaining about stuff.
So to work towards a solution, what I think would probably be best is we always need to begin with a singular question, which what is mission critical? Like what is required for you to be able to do what you need to do and for users to be able to interact. Mission. Right. And then we test around that, right? So if you're heavily using cloud, then we focus on cloud pen testing and we try to get into that environment and see what we can do there. If you have deployments that are externally facing, then we need to test your external environment and see whether we can get in from externally using exploits or social engineering or anything along those lines. If everything is internal to the environment and you don't have anything exposed, then we need to look at it from, okay, so someone's managed to successfully phish you. Let's go ahead and put that Kali deployment on site and see what we can get into internally. If you don't identify first exactly what is going to be crucial to your environment, then you never know what you're going to be effectively testing. And then you're probably going to choose the wrong pen test, because it's just like Richard said, if someone's using O365 just for emails, yes, that can be problematic for sure, but it's not going to be the same as like, okay, all of our organization's data is on like OneDrive. And if someone gets into our OneDrive, we're screwed.
Well, and so what you were saying, I think many of the things that we do, we take a layered approach to almost everything, right? We're not just relying on network detection or response. We've got endpoint detection or response. We've got cloud detection or response. We try to put as many layers in place that we possibly can. And I think we can take this same mentality and put that to pen testing, because going to your point that you said that the very first, before you start anything, you have to ask, what is mission critical? What do we need to actually test, right? I think one of the ways that you can start a pen test, or at least start the process of a pen test, is have a tabletop. Have a tabletop. Let's go through a simulated event of a particular attack method and locate where we may have some deficiencies, and maybe we could test those, right? Or the other thing too that I think with pen testing specifically is, which we have found, is that people typically don't know all of their assets within their environment. So instead of starting with a pen test, let's do an inventory. Let's do like asset management or attack surface management. Let's try to identify.
But Bryce's insurance does not require that I have that stuff. It requires a pen test.
Well, again, we're talking about how do we break that idea? How do we improve when somebody just comes up to you and says, well, I need a pen test. And it's like, okay, well, we could do a vulnerability scan and that'll probably check the box. But how do we do this effectively? How do we do this the Sinary way, right? And make this actually useful and actionable.
Honestly, with the democratization of how easy it is to be able to perpetrate some of these attacks, what insurance is quote unquote requiring is oftentimes the bare minimum. And you can honestly get there if you are just focusing on trying to make as secure of an environment as possible for yourself. If you focus on the good, like forget your insurance for half a second. Like, what can I do to best secure my environment against an attacker? It's going to be MFA. It's going to be running a pen test in order to see where those deficiencies are. It's going to be patch management.
So it gets into the idea of having controls designed and then testing them in operation. That's where the assessment comes in really handy. Okay, how do you prevent somebody from logging in that shouldn't log in? Well, we've got, MFA, we've got AD syncs to our HR system. Okay, great. That's great. Those sound like reasonable controls. Now let's test them, right? And that's really, I think, the difference between an assessment and a pen test. A pen test is another term for audit, right? You're testing the controls that they are supposed to, they claim to have in place.
Right.
Right. And you're gathering that evidence that either they do or they don't, or they can be enhanced or whatever that may be on the pen test. But again, I think it comes down to, we're really good at this because, this is our biz, right? We explain to everybody that calls or comes in as, okay, I need a pen test. Okay, let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about what you mean by pen test, and really breaking it down, because again, a pen test, if you're asking me for, I don't know, I just need to know if I can be hacked. Okay, here's a phishing email. I've hacked you. Is that
satisfactory?
Because all I'm doing is testing one thing, right? I'm not really testing anything else. But if you come in and say, "Hey, I need a security assessment. I want to know where the holes are."
Right.
To Brad's point, a tabletop exercise is great for that. You sit them around a table, go through a scenario. What would you do in this case? What would you do in this case? What controls do you have here? And then maybe a vulnerability scanner, maybe some light pen testing on the backside of that.
Well, I think you take the tabletop method, and that's like your qualitative, like the idea of like, okay, let's do this in theory. and then the pen test is your quantitative. Let's actually take and test that like legitimately and make sure that those work. But going to your point about the whole, well, let's test the controls, right? I do think that is extremely valid. The idea of a pen test is kind of just another form of an audit. But I think to truly do something that is valuable when you say pen testing is trying to discover the unknown unknowns, right?
Yes.
So the idea of, okay, I know I have all these controls in place. Let's test them. But also, what controls do I not have in place that you can abuse to get into the environment?
Or what do I not even know that's out there?
Yeah. Well, so for example, like we've done pen testing, or really a red team pen test, again, semantics, but where we've identified where there API endpoints for externally facing web servers were misconfigured and allowed, sensitive data to be dumped, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an unknown. They had there was probably controls, tons of controls in place,
and to be honest with you, it was nothing that we were actually looking for.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We happened upon it. And then going back to your asset inventory part as well, we've also had pen tests, or not pen tests, but this would be more of like our security assessment side of things, to where we actually discovered an entire range that they didn't even know that they had.
Yeah.
And so, it especially whenever you have organizations where the tech director or the IT team changes frequently, or has changed over even the last 20 years, you get sprawl. And whenever sprawl happens, you have things that get lost to the wayside, especially since the idea of cybersecurity has really only escalated over the last 20 years, but it wasn't necessarily the norm whenever a lot of these systems were first designed or implemented. So it really behooves everyone to make sure that you actually know what's on your network and have an inventory of everything, because that is a prime starting point to know what is mission critical and what's not.
If you come to us and say, hey guys, I need to understand what my network looks like, that's a much different thing than a penetration test.
Yes.
Or a security assessment, right? That's a different methodology. That's a different tool set. That's completely different. So I think
I think it's the starting point.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is that we, here at Sinary, we do a good job of trying to explain that to the client and understanding what that is. But we have to have some information about the environment. Now, whether we go to Shodan and get that, we do DNS Dumpster and dump all that information, we're not coming in blind to it. We're going to do our recon.
Well, I think that's like the crux, the Sinary way. You get the amount of people, going back to some third parties, where I can't speak to all of them by any means, and I guarantee you a lot of companies do this. It's not like, if I can think about it, other people have thought about it. But we have seen where these third-party pen testing companies, they literally jump to the end thing. Let me ship that Cali box to you and just run the scan.
Right.
They don't even think of all this stuff we've been discussing.
Now, here's the question. Did they contract to do a pen test? And what kind of pen test? Like, we don't know that they're actually saying, if somebody says, hey, I need a pen test. Okay, here's a Cali box, put this on your network, I'll pen test you.
And I guess that is my end goal with this conversation, is to impress upon everyone that pen tests do not help nearly as much as almost anything else. Like doing asset inventory, doing tabletops, doing a full security assessment, even just really good vulnerability scans on internal and external facing deployments, even that will give you a better understanding of your risk environment than doing a single pen test.
Well, it is like with many of audits or anything like that, and I think that's why we are getting in kind of the more expensive area, like a idea of adopting continuous, because what you're doing with a pen test is it is a snapshot of a moment in time that 2 weeks down the road, it is no longer valid, or
Right.
most likely is no longer valid, especially if you close up the holes. And when you're talking about larger organizations, you do a pen test. Well, if you're talking about cloud environments, let's say you have an Azure environment, well, hell, you could have Azure VMs spin up and spin down within seconds. So you do a pen test on an environment at, let's say, 6 a.m. in the morning, and you have all of these assets that exist within an Azure environment. Well, on the weekend, they spin all those assets down because they're trying to save money and they don't need them. Well, that's an entirely different pen test depending on the time in which you do it.
And you're going
Right.
you're going to hire a firm, a pen testing firm. You're going to spend $60,000-$70,000, probably midway fee, to get a moment in time snapshot.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Signary does the best. I do want to touch and share my thoughts on a solution. I think the sad thing is if there isn't a standard for it, there won't be a solution. And you know, one very easy example is vaccines. You don't have to get your flu shot. You'll probably still be fine. But I still remember going into school, right, like 7th grade, meningitis shot, TB shot. If you didn't have those, you could not enroll. So if they're not enforceable standards, you know, unfortunately, it will continue to be a problem until there is. But I do think that's what Signary does the best. Just because it's not a standard out there doesn't mean, you know, we're not constantly reminding our clients that this is better. We should do this.
Come by the sock and get your flu shot.
Yeah. Well, and it's because we approach it like I was talking about before in that good faith measure of we're not worried about some other industry standard or what the insurance wants of them. We're not trying to check off a checklist. That's not our end goal.
No, our process has always been risk based.
Right.
Always, not compliance based.
Exactly. And so because of that, we're constantly working towards what can we do to help lower that risk profile.
The other thing about a pen test, not only is it a snapshot in time, but there's a high likelihood that you're not finding everything. Right?
Yeah.
A full-on assessment, tabletop, inventory, easy,
Sorry.
big man,
Yeah, sorry,
easy
you just
over there.
trip down the stairs.
Yeah, too much beer.
You're looking not only at a snapshot in time, but you're also looking at a limited environment. Most likely, you're not going to catch everything that could be done if somebody were to come in. I mean, how many times would probably I just had a pen test, and well,
What I find very funny, even just with some of our clientele base, is sometimes what is good is not easy.
yes,
It's not simple. And that's kind of the crux of the issue. I keep giving these weird examples, so I hope they're really, landing home somewhere.
Are you about to bring in a jellyfish into the conversation?
That's actually my next example. The one I was going to bring up is a super simple one. I hate the dentist, but every time I go, they tell me to floss.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I floss is a different question, right? And the reason I relate the two is because it may not be that hard, but it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. It's good for me.
Network hygiene. Maybe that's how we need to start putting
And
this stuff.
so it's super simple to think about it in more like readily affected, body parts. Right? We use our teeth every day. Right? Want to make sure that they're clean, that we keep them healthy. But my example is, if we were to be the dentist or the doctor, how often do you go? Right? It recommended once every 6 months, and then I never see my dentist, right? Like, oh, okay, here's my 6-month visit. Won't talk to you again for another 6 months. I think that's what Signary also does amazingly well. We don't.
Here's what I know. I think we just hit got the podcast title, Flu Shots and Pen Tests.
I was gonna say
flu shots, pen tests, and weather.
We've hit on some controversial subjects today.
We have, but
is that going to increase our viewership finally?
Probably not.
how about vaccinate your servers?
Vaccination.
Yeah, please install EDR.
Yeah. So I do want to close it here. It's been just about an hour, and I know some of these conversations we can run really long because we're all passionate about it. But just some closing thoughts, that if you are listening to this and you're thinking about getting a pen test, try to understand exactly what you're asking for, right? And try to relay that to the company. If you call a company and they say, and you ask them for a pen test, they say, yes, we can do that. Here's a quote. here's a Cali box. Kind of think twice about that, because it's probably not lining up to your objectives because they didn't even ask your objectives. Right. So keep that in mind. If you call us to do a pen test, we're going to be, hey, let's sit down and talk about this over an hour or so that we can understand what your objectives are, right? Mm-hmm. And at the end of that, we can develop a scope of work. Also understand that if you had a pen test done and you've gotten a report on it, that report is highly qualified, I'm sure, by the company that wrote it. And in there, it should say exactly what they tested in their methodology, and it's probably going to be missing half the stuff that you thought may have been tested as well. And
another thing that I want to bring up too, if the same company that is doing your network architecture and network setup is offering you a pen test, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there.
You don't have the person who does the administration also do the auditing.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. That's classic. I write the checks and balance the checkbook. I'll reconcile all that stuff for you. So, all right, guys. Well, listen, it has been fun today. I appreciate everybody's attendance. I only had one beer today, which is
yeah,
good.
Me too.
One beer and what is that, a 40?
Yeah, it's a 40 and like 50% alcohol. So
I feel good.
Yeah. So you guys have a great weekend. Appreciate it. And
vaccinate your servers.
Vaccinate your servers, and we will see you next week.